Hello, friends, and happy spring. If you're new here, welcome in, and if you're returning, welcome back. I'm Hannah, and in today's video, we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in March. I had a slower reading month in March than the first two, mainly because 75 Booked ended this month. It ended March 15th. I managed to complete it in one go, which was a great and awesome experience, but it meant that I was reading a ton during that time because I had set aside an hour and a half every day for reading. But once that was over, I found that I just had a lot of other things that I need to focus on for the last few weeks of March. But I still got through 9 books in March, so it's not like I had a abysmal reading month by any standard. So anyway, let's just dive right in and talk about all of the books. First thing that I finished in March was this quick little novella that I picked up for one of my commute reads. I always like to pick up shorter books because I have to ride a bus to my office 4 days a week now, and it's usually about a 30-minute trip. So I like to take a book with me, but I like to keep them shorter, just easier to carry in my bag. And the first one that I decided to grab was Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa. This is kind of that cozy Japanese fiction genre that has been really popular for quite a few years now. Think like Before the Coffee Gets Cold and that type of thing. In this, you are following Tokoko. She is 24 years old at the start of the book, and she is going through a really difficult time. She and her boyfriend break up, and she ends up kind of going into this downward spiral. She loses her job. She kind of loses all of her acquaintances. Very isolated, very depressed, very lonely. And when things are getting really, really bleak and low, she gets a call from her uncle Satoru, who owns a used bookshop, and offers to let her come live with him for a couple of months, get back on her feet, kind of recenter herself. And Tokoko, who is um, running out of money, she's broke. She's been, paying her rent with savings, but she basically has nothing left. She kind of feels like this is the only option she really has, even though it isn't really something she wants to do. She's not very close with her uncle. She's, in that state of mind where I think, it's self-destruction is preferred, but she agrees to go do it. And she ends up going and moving in above the bookshop. And Tokoko is not somebody who, she's not a reader. She's not big into books. She's not big into any of that. But over the course of spending the time at the bookshop, she finds a love for reading and kind of is re-inspired to connect with other people and kind of help her move on from these difficult feelings and challenges that she's been facing for so long. I really enjoyed this a lot more. I read Before the Coffee Gets Cold earlier this year, and I liked that one. I think I like this one more because it felt very Tokoko feels very realistic, and there's just something about her and the way that she is that I kind of resonated with in some ways. Her kind of discovering this love of reading and this love of stories and books I thought was really compelling and interesting. And then even more than that is just because this is so much a journey of her like reintroducing herself to the world in some ways and connecting with people again and getting outside of her own head, which I found to be kind of really inspiring and is a word I could use there, but it just was something that I felt really cathartic to read about, I guess, in some ways, especially considering the current climate. It just feels like having a book like this that is so focused on community and family and healing and taking care of each other. I think maybe that's what resonated with me a little bit. This is a very short book. It's 150 pages, and it's not just a story about Tokoko, because you also are getting a really strong sense into her uncle, and you find out that her aunt Momoko has been missing for a while. She just left. It's not like a missing persons case. It's just she left a note and said, I'm going to head out for a while, and she's been gone for a period of time. And you're kind of seeing the impact that this has had on Satoru. And the kind of dynamic that forms between Tokoko and Satoru, I think, is really interesting and compelling. Satoru is a very kind of aloof, and he just kind of does his own thing and all that. And I found him to be a very fun character. And there's a moment in here where he kind of steps up to the plate to kind of be not necessarily a protector, but an advocate, I think, for Tokoko. And it happens in many different ways, but this one instance kind of culminates in the first I guess third of the book. And it just, I don't know, I felt like it was, it's a very kind of heartfelt moment, but I found it to be really enjoyable. So this does have a sequel. I don't remember when it came out, but I don't know if it'll be one that I dive into after this, maybe if I find it at my library or something. But yeah, this was a nice way to start off March. Next book that I finished in March was one that has been on my want to read list for quite a while now, and I'm so glad that I finally got to it because this was a really enjoyable book, and that was Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This is the UK edition. I picked this up when I was in London last year for my birthday, and it's just been sitting on my shelf for months ever since then. And I'm so glad that I finally have just dove in because I had high expectations for this book. I really was hoping that I would enjoy it. I've heard lots of great things. People tend to really rave about it and love it. And I am so glad to say that I am also in that boat. I did really enjoy my time with this. This is the first book in a trilogy. It is set in a world where Fae exist, and Emily has traveled to this remote, wintry island called Ronsvik to study the Fae that are up there so that she can continue work on her encyclopedia. And she is such an interesting character because she's very smart. She can be very cunning, very resourceful in terms of like book smarts, but she has no idea how to like survive. She's this island that she goes to. It is very cold. There is snow. She needs to be able to like chop firewood and keep a fire going, and she gets there and she has no idea how to do any of this, and it's just her and her dog Shadow, who is like this big black lumbering kind of beast and a delight. I love Shadow. She also really lacks some social skills. She kind of puts herself at odds with the village townsfolk like very quickly, and she can't really understand why. She's just so smart, but then sometimes you're just like, Emily, why did you do that? But she just is settling in and beginning to like do her own research and stuff and start to figure things out when our male main character shows up, and that is Wendell Bamblebee. And oh my gosh, I love Wendell. Wendell is a delight. Wendell, if Emily is very pragmatic and practical and focused, Wendell is very aloof and a little bit of a narcissist and very focused on his own comforts. And he brings these two assistants with him that are students, and they kind of do studenty things, but mostly he kind of treats them like foot servants. And it's just, he's hilarious. It's like a tornado come bursting onto the scene. And Emily and him are rivals, although I think she views it as a much stronger rivalry than he does. And he kind of gets tied up in her own research, but then they both end up kind of tied up in this larger plot. Kind of, there's just a lot going on that they both kind of get tied into, things that are happening with the villagers that are tied to the Fae, and they have different motivations. Wendell is kind of hiding this secret that he's currently trying to kind of sort through, and it's not like quite a secret. Emily has already kind of has her suspicions about who he is and what he is, and she just kind of like is biding her time with that information. And it's just, it sends them on this like adventure, and they're in the woods and in the snow, and there's just like, it just felt like such a fun romp. And it was, I would say it's cozy technically, but the thing that I love about this is that the stakes feel high. And at no point in time did I knew everything was going to work out fine, but there were points in this book and I was just like, oh, Emily, I don't know how you're getting yourself out of this. She would put herself in situations and I would just be like, I don't understand how you were going to get out of this. And she always, there's Wendell sometimes helps, Shadow sometimes helps, sometimes she is able to use her own kind of brains and intelligence and resources to do it. But I really ended up enjoying this overall. I found Emily to be a little bit frustrating by the end because I do feel like she is very headstrong and very set in her ways. And even over the course of the book and these decisions she's making, she even has moments where she's like, oh, maybe I made the wrong decision here. But she doesn't ever really change. Even by the end of the book, like, you're still going, yes, you're still Emily, you're still headstrong, and you are kind of set in your ways, and this is kind of who you are. So that I kind of was a little bit frustrated with by the end, but yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to read the second book. I have the second and third on my shelf, so I will absolutely be diving into the sequel very soon because I really need to know what is going to happen next with these two and what adventures they go on next. In a similar vein, I decided to continue a duology that I started in February. I just was so enthralled with the first book that I read in February that I just really wanted to dive into this one before I forgot a single thing that happened in the first. So I finished Made by Ali Hazelwood. This book, again, I'll reiterate what I said in my last video. I don't read a ton of paranormal romance. I've never really been a paranormal person. It just hasn't ever really spoke to me, but I really did have a lot of fun with this. And in fact, I don't know if I preferred Bride or if I preferred this. I think I preferred the characters of Bride, like our two main characters, but I preferred the plot and the story of Mate. In Mate, without saying too much, because I do feel like this book is kind of a big, like, the ending of Bride is very important to the setup of Mate. You're following our two main characters. This is really focused on the wares rather than the vampires are still playing a part, but this book is very much focused on the wares only. Our male main character is Cohen. He is introduced in the first book. He is the head of another one of the were packs in the country, and our female main character is also introduced in the first book. And I don't really want to say anything more than that because it does feel like a kind of a big spoiler if you haven't read Bride. So, but basically, Fated Mates plays heavily into here. You have two characters who are both kind of hiding secrets from each other. Cults are brought up. You have our female main character is harboring kind of a big secret, and a lot of people are interested in this secret, but then she is also keeping a separate secret because she is very sick, and she's not telling anybody that she's very sick except for like her doctors, but her doctors are kind of like, you're going to die soon, so she doesn't want to burden anybody with that, so she's kind of keeping all this information to herself, and including from Cohen. And over the course of the book, you kind of she's trying to figure out what's wrong with her. Is there any way to like save herself? But then she also kind of finds herself embroiled with this other kind of like, not scheme that's going on, but there are people interested in her that are dangerous, and she doesn't really know what to make with them. Nobody really knows what to make of them, but it also is really tied into the were history. So yeah, there's just a lot of layers and levels to this. I had a lot of fun reading it. I mean, the spice was really good in this, I will say. Bride had a lot of spice. I think this has even more. I would say like the last 70-ish, 100 pages are very heavy on the spice. So if that is something you are very interested in, this is the book for you. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Cohen as a male main character in some ways. I found him to be a little bit irritating. He kind of has this very like, I mean, he's an alpha, so he has that like alpha male personality, but he just never like gets put in his place. And I like when a main character like that gets put in his place. And I don't really feel like he does at any point in this book. This was a really satisfying conclusion to the duology. Had a great time with this. This will be my third Ali Hazelwood. I'm enjoying her stuff. I'm going to try to read a few more of her books, but I still don't know that I love her writing enough to go try all of the STEM novels. Those ones still don't speak to me, but I did enjoy my time with this one. Switching gears a little bit, I decided to go back into kind of the literary fiction route, and I wanted to dive into an author that I read for the first time last year, which is Ann Patchett. I've had a few books of hers on my shelf for quite a while, and this one in particular, I've been looking at for years and years, and finally I said, this is the time to read it. The book I'm talking about is The Magician's Assistant by Ann Patchett. I loved The Dutch House by Ann Patchett. I read that last year and absolutely adored it. I think it was probably one of my best books of 2025 that I read, and I had high hopes for this one. But the thing that I have learned about Ann Patchett's work is that what I think I'm going to get from the book is never right, and I mean that in a complimentary way. Reading the back blurb of this book, I thought I was going to get like a very like, there is a mystery to this, but I thought it was going to be like this very kind of almost more thriller aspect, and that's not what you're getting here at all. In this, you are following Sabine. This is set in the mid-90s, and Sabine for the last 20 years has been the assistant to a famous magician named Parzival, and at the start of the book, he has suddenly died. She has been married to him for about a year now, and he has left everything to her. He was already sick, but he did not die of the illness he has. He died of something different. It seems like she's just going to have to grieve, and she is grieving very heavily. I don't want to say too much because when you read the book, everything makes sense. But she is kind of grieving multiple losses because there was another death recently as well. And she is feeling very alone and isolated despite her being very close with her parents. And then this kind of bombshell is dropped when she gets news from her husband's lawyer saying that this family that Parzival had always said was dead is alive, and he has left them money in the will, not like not substantial amounts, but enough to like let them live comfortably. And Sabine is kind of blown away by this because this family, Parzival has said, was dead for many, many years. He has always claimed that they were dead. They died in a tragic accident. And then she finds out that basically the entire story around his family was all made up. And it sends her on this journey to meeting this family and kind of getting closer to them. And it just turns into this very kind of like, I don't want to say introspective, but it is very much like Sabine kind of relearning who she is, because for so long she was this person who she's madly in love with Parzival. He was the love of her life, but even if he didn't love her in quite the way that she needed him to, you have her kind of dealing with all of these feelings of grief and confusion and kind of, when you find out your husband had lied to you, somebody she had known for, 20 plus years had lied to you about so much, it's kind of set her on this strange path to trying to understand why he would lie about it. The book starts in LA and then it ends up going to Nebraska, which is where this family lives. And she kind of connects with them, and I think there's a lot of things that I don't want to say it's aged super well. Like I said, this was written in the mid 90s, but there are certain elements of this that really spoke to me as somebody who grew up in the Midwest. I don't think she has like a fully accurate look at what the Midwest life is like, but there are very certain things in here that I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like living in like a small town in the Midwest. There's a whole paragraph in here talking about how like Walmarts or like the big box stores are kind of like the central hubs of smaller communities, because it's like that's where you go to buy everything, but it's also where you go to see people, it's where you go to be alone, it's where you go to like do all these different things. And that is such an accurate statement, I feel like, in so many ways. And a lot of experiences I've had is that like that becomes like such a central point. It's like you can see anybody at the grocery store, when you're in these kind of small towns. So I thought that was really kind of touching and interesting, and kind of some of the callbacks and like technology stuff I think is really kind of made me nostalgic for a different time a little bit. Sabina as a character, I found her to be interesting. I think she's kind of so numb with grief for much of this book, and she's just dissociated from everything. And I think that you can see that colors everything she does. I found this to be a really interesting look at like connection and, understanding why people would lie about things and how does that affect your opinion of them after they're gone. So yeah, I enjoyed this. I think I still love Dutch House more. I think Dutch House just as a whole was just an incredibly well executed book. This one had a lot of really great things, and I will be keeping it on my shelf, but the ending felt a little bit abrupt. Glad I finally got to this though. This has been on my shelf for like probably a decade at this point. So I'm glad that I finally got it read. Switching genres yet again, I wanted to pick up something that was kind of fun and easy, lighthearted, because I was in the middle of a couple of deeper literary books at that point. I decided to grab The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman, which is the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I absolutely loved the first book in this, and this one was even better than the first, I think. This is following a group of 4 retired people living in this retirement village in the UK, and they had this club where they were trying to solve cold cases just for fun. In the first book, they get involved in an actual murder that happens on the property, and that kind of sets them off on this whole like being involved in a real murder case, and they get tied to ties with the police and stuff. And so it sets up this really interesting kind of just premise for books going forward. In this one, the first one, you were really focused, I would argue, on Joyce and Ron. So you have Joyce, Ron, Elizabeth, and Ibrahim. They all kind of get a little bit of page time in the first book, but I think you're really mostly focused on Joyce and Ron. In this one, you're really heavily focused on Elizabeth and Ibrahim. Elizabeth's ex-husband comes into the picture, and he has done something and needs her help, and Elizabeth agrees to help him, and then people start ending up dead, and it kind of turns into this very complex, convoluted mystery that involves a jewel heist and the mafias from multiple countries, and it's all set with this very humorous background of these 4 kind of old people who are like trying to like navigate daily life but also solve this mystery. Like Joyce gets an Instagram account, and she makes the account name, I want to say it's like something Joy 69 and Divine Joy or something 69, and she keeps talking about how she's getting all these private messages and she doesn't know how to read them, but she's getting like hundreds of them. And she's like, people just really must connect with my name. Obviously, there's a sexual innuendo there that she's not realizing because she's just too sweet and like innocent, naive to like catch on. But there's just like silliness kind of going on behind the scenes. But then there's also this really touching, deep angle that you get from Ibrahim, because at the very beginning of the book, something happens to him that makes him pull back and kind of be very afraid of the world. And over the course of the book, you have him kind of trying to deal with those feelings. And it's so sweet because of the way that he's kind of pulled out of his shell a little bit is through a new character that we meet. And I don't want to say anything more than that because I do feel like it's just so sweet. And the way that it all kind of comes together, I just would rather people have be a surprise. I think the mystery is definitely solvable. I'm not really one of those people that reads a mystery and is like, oh my gosh, I need to figure this out. It's just not. I just read for fun. If I can figure it out, great, but it doesn't make me that mad if it's like, well, they didn't reveal this, you know, how could I have figured out the mystery on my own? It just doesn't bother me. But I do feel like this one is solvable. I feel like they give you plenty of breadcrumbs throughout the book to try to like piece together. I had figured out a few things pretty early on, but then there were a couple twists at the end that I wasn't expecting. MVP of this book though is Bogdan. Bogdan is like, he's like kind of like one of the caretakers for the facility. Like he like does like maintenance and stuff, and he's just like, he's got these like dark, I don't want to say dark secrets, but like this man has seen some stuff and he knows how to like exist in the shadows and things. And I just, every time he's on page, I love him. He is just an absolute delight. And there's something that is kind of set up with him and another character near the end of this book that I am absolutely enthralled with, and I cannot wait to read more about it. So the next book on this will be on my list for Independent Bookstore Day at the end of the month to pick up. But I really enjoyed this series and this book, and I hope that this series has many more books to come. I think there's 5 out right now, and I hope he puts out a dozen more. So yeah. All right, time to talk about my absolute favorite read of possibly the whole year, definitely this month. I had high hopes for this book because so many people have raved about it. I had very high expectations for it as well, and I'm very pleased to say this book surpassed even those expectations, and that is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is the UK edition. The US edition is very like minimalist, abstract art kind of. I love this cover, and I bought this book when I was in London last year because I knew that this was the edition that I wanted. In this, it is set in an unknown time and an unknown place, and you are following an unnamed narrator who, her entire life, she has lived in captivity with 39 other women, all who are much older than her. They have lived this way for as long as she can remember, and everything has kind of bled together for them. They know there was a time before when they didn't live in this prison, but they don't know how they got here and why they're here. And this book is a lot of questions like that. And our narrator is kind of coming of age. She's about, I think, 16 at the start of this book, and she is truly coming of age. She's having kind of a sexual awakening. Her mind is expanding. She's thinking about things in different ways, kind of taking very philosophical looks at different ideas. And she starts to think that maybe they should be trying to get out of here. And then one day something changes and they are able to break free of this prison. They're able to go to the surface. What they discover is very different from anything that they have known before. This book, I could probably do an hour-long talk just about this book because there are so many things that I loved about this. This is really an examination of what makes us human. How do you survive when you don't have anything to survive for? Like you don't have anything to live for. When things seem bleak, like what makes us human and what makes us motivated to even try to continue on? You know, how do you hold on to hope when it seems like all hope is lost? There's so many different layers to this. There's a really interesting look at, you know, womanhood and what makes us women. The core of it really is like humanity, though. You know, what makes us human? If we don't talk, if we have nobody to talk to, are we still human? If we have nobody to connect to, are we still human? What makes us human? And when you take away all these extra things, like being able to like create or build or, you know, farm or all these things, when you take all of that away, what are we? The book opens with the narrator reflecting on her life. She is much older, and then she's retelling the story of how she got to where she is. And I just found this to be so compelling and so devastating and just so beautifully written. It is very short. It's like 200 pages, just over 200 pages, and it is just such a thought-provoking read. I think that there's a lot of discourse around this. I feel like some people feel like this is very anti-feminist, which I disagree with entirely. I think this is incredibly feminist, and I think that the narrator, in some ways, because you are not given much, she doesn't even have a name. They never name her. Even these older women, she comes in with no name, and they never name her, despite all the other women having names. She never gets named. She never is quite treated like the rest, and I think that's very interesting, because it kind of questions, like, again, not does her not having a name mean she's less of a human? There's just so many interesting layers and complexities to this that I just found myself just thinking about for days and days and days after I finished reading this. I do really want to reread this, I think sooner rather than later, because I would love to annotate it. Probably top 3 read of this year so far, and I don't see this book getting beat at this point. So yeah, just an incredible journey of a story. The next book was a surprise. I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because I picked this up because Fairy Loot, who does special editions of books, posted that they were doing this series as special editions. And when I saw the post, I had never even heard of the books, but the designs were gorgeous, and it made me go read the blurb about the book. And I was like, you know what, let's see if we can get it from the library and just give it a read. I was able to get a physical copy from the library right away, and so I went and picked it up. And that book is Servant of Earth by Sarah Hawley. This is, I think, technically considered a romantasy, but I would argue that it has romantic elements in a fantasy book, because there is romance in play in here, but I really feel like it's not important to the story hardly at all, from like a true romance standpoint. In this, you are following Kenna. Kenna lives in a fictional world where the Fae are real. It's another Fae story. Read a lot of Fae books this month. Her village of Tumbledown is at the edge of the human world and the Fae world. There's a bog that kind of splits these two areas, and her village is on that bog. Kenna is the daughter of the herbalist healer of the town, and her mother has died a few years ago. And Kenna is kind of viewed as this like feral wild child, not because she like acts out or anything, but just because she's very isolated and lonely, and she kind of does her own thing. She doesn't, act like the rest of the girls, where she's like wearing pretty dresses and stuff, and, doesn't dream of marriage and all that. She's just trying to survive. And she has this best friend, Anya, who is very much more of that traditional female kind of archetype, traditional woman. She's very beautiful and, just wants to be married and have, she wears nice clothes. I love Anya as a character. We don't get to spend too much time with her, but I really enjoy her. I think she and Ken are very interesting together. And what I love about both of them is that their friendship is so deep and honest, and at no point do they put down the other for the choices that they make. Like, Kenna doesn't agree with Anya. She doesn't want Anya to go just get married to a random guy so she can have that stability. She wants, Anya to be able to like make her own choices and do things because it's something she wants to do, not just because she feels obligated or forced to. So there's a lot of interesting things there. This book starts on the winter solstice, and Tumbledown has a ritual that they perform every 6 years, where 4 human women are sent to the Fae realm as like offerings to go live among the Fae. And in return, the Fae are supposed to provide protection to the humans. And this happens every 6 years. This is the first time that Kenna, because you have to be between the ages of 20 and 30 to be a potential candidate for this offering. And this is the first year Kenna and Anya are both eligible. Kenna doesn't really believe that this works because the humans are suffering so much. Like, there's poverty and food shortages, and people are going missing, and she believes that the Fae may be involved. There's just a lot that she has her suspicions about, and she doesn't want to be involved in this in any way. She's just hoping she and Anya can just get through the ritual and it can just go on their way. The morning of the ritual, Kenna is out in the bog, and she is kind of just like searching for treasure and stuff, and she finds this knife. And the knife is very clearly Fae magic, and she takes it with her, and she quickly discovers that after going through this ritual and finding herself involved and going to the Fae world, this dagger is very clearly going to be the key to her survival in the Fae world. She quickly realizes that things are not what the town elders said they would be, and she is given as a servant to one of the 6 houses that are like the 6 branches of magic that are in this Fae world. One of the branches has been basically destroyed by the king, who is this very evil, very psychopathic ruler who has ruled for too long and is a little bit crazy. A lot of people don't trust him. He's very violent. She's gifted to the Earth House to serve as the maid for the daughter of Earth House, Lara. And Lara, along with a bunch of other Fae, are about to embark on trials in order to gain their immortality and their magic. And Kenna is tasked with helping Lara with those trials. Lara, I think, is a really interesting character. She evolves very complexly over the course of the book, and I have a lot of sympathy for her by the end. And I think she's just very interesting because when you first meet her, she's very much this like entitled, not necessarily spoiled, but she's very pouty. At the same time, it's very clearly hiding her insecurities with her own abilities. I just really loved how her friendship developed with Kenna. And Kenna becomes not just entangled in these trials, but also she finds out that there's kind of this rebellion cooking. There are some leaders of certain houses that don't want this king serving anymore, and she kind of finds herself entwined with multiple factions who are all kind of vying for control of the situation. I really enjoyed this book. I mean, the trials thing is a little bit overdone in kind of this genre, I think. Felt like a very kind of unique approach to it. The trials themselves felt very unique from others that I have read. I haven't read a ton of books like this, to be clear, but I really enjoyed it. I love where it ended. The only thing I will say is I think this is being set up as kind of a love triangle, which annoys me immensely. One of the men involved, I think this is truly a morally gray. I would argue they're probably both morally gray, both of them male main characters that are involved in this, but the first one, he is truly morally gray because I think a lot of his character is like, what are you willing to do for the good of for the good of the many? There's a lot of discussions around power and who deserves power and who should be in power, and Kenna is just a very interesting figure to have kind of in amongst all this because she never really wants power. She just wants to protect the people that she cares about and to like help as many people as she can. So really excited to see where book 2 goes. I think the 3rd book comes out later this year, but I will be trying to get my hands on book 2 as quickly as possible. The next book that I finished was another library book, and that was 10 Minutes 38 Seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak. I feel like I had heard a lot of things about this book when it first came out some time back. I don't remember what year this was released, but this book is fascinating because it is told the first part of the book is told from the perspective of a woman who has been murdered. You are following her in the 10 minutes and 38 seconds before her brain shuts down after this murder. Each chapter is like a minute of time of her thinking back on her life and how she got to this point. Our main character is named Lila. Lila is her nickname. She is a sex worker in Istanbul, and she has had an incredibly difficult road to get where she is, to her tragic kind of end. But she is such a compelling and interesting woman to read about. She is kind of an unwanted daughter who is struggling with kind of the familial relations around her. She is traumatized, and this book has a lot of content warnings, so do be aware of those content warnings before you read it because there is a lot of heavy subject matter in here, including assault, sexual assault. It's a difficult read, but it is so beautifully written, and the way that you were kind of weave through her memories of her past, and not just that, but also she focuses on the 5 people that she has met over the years. It's the 5, and she focuses on how she met these people and their connections to her and how important they are to her. And it's a really kind of a found family story for all of them. And all of them are so vibrantly different and interesting, and just the way that they all kind of connect together and care about each other kind of drives the back third of the story. Leela she's a woman who is willing to do what is necessary to survive. But she always wants to help the people around her as well. She believes in love. It's very interesting because sex work is a huge part of this story, and it's not a critique of sex work, and sex work is bad. It's a critique of the system as a whole and how dangerous it can be for the women who are involved in it when men can get violent or they're not being paid properly. There's a lot of interesting layers to it. I don't even know what else to say about this book. It was just really beautifully done. I actually I understand why the back third of the book is there. I almost wish it wasn't there. And I kind of am still have mixed feelings about whether or not I feel like it was necessary. I almost feel like just those 10 minutes, 38 seconds was what was really strong. But I also think that last third of the book is very necessary in order to give closure to her specifically, to Layla specifically. So beautifully written, a very heavy book. Do not go into it without checking out some of the content warning. It's a beautiful book, and I'm really glad that I spent the time to read it. Final book of the month is a very different genre. I wanted to move back into kind of the cozy fantasy space that I had with Emily Wilde, and I decided to grab The Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst. I feel like this book has been all around. People have been talking about it for a couple of years now. I think it came out in like 2024 maybe. This is quintessential cozy fantasy. If you want a cozy fantasy, this is a cozy fantasy. You are following Keela. This is set in kind of a fantasy world, and Keela lives in the capital of the Crescent Islands, and she is a librarian in the Great Library. She oversees spell books, and magic is heavily guarded in this world. Anybody can really do magic, but they keep it to certain individuals. Keela has just been in charge of seeing over this part of the library for a long time. But at the start of the book, a rebellion has broken out in the capital, and the library is lit on fire. And so she takes some of these spell books and she retreats with her plant friend Kaz, who is a talking spider plant. And they get on a boat and they take these books and they sail to the island where she grew up, decides to hide out there because she believes that, the capital might have fallen and she doesn't know what's going to happen to these spell books and she wants to protect them. When she gets to the island, she plans on just living very isolated and alone. She just plans on like being there for as long as she needs to and then leaving. But she quickly finds herself tied up with some of the townsfolk, including Laren, our male main character. He kind of shows up and he's this very kind of lovable, he's a merhorse rancher, and he just wants to like be there and be helpful, and like he shows up offering like food and check on her and stuff. And Keela's very standoffish. She has never been very social. Like Kaz is her friend and she has her books and that's all she really wants. She quickly becomes tied up in this island because she finds out that because of the unrest in the capital that has been happening for quite a while, the magic is kind of out of balance everywhere, including on this island, and the island and its inhabitants are suffering. And so she decides maybe she can try to help by using these spell books, even though she's not supposed to be doing magic. And the story kind of goes from there. I went into this knowing this was going to be very cozy fantasy. The stakes are going to be low. It is going to be a very sweet story. Everything's going to be tied up with a bow. And because I went in with that, I think it allowed me to enjoy this book more. I think had I been in a different mood, I probably would give this a lot lower rating. I think the writing itself is good, and Keela is an okay main character. I feel like the way that other characters in the story interact with her, I don't feel like she's difficult to like read necessarily. And I think it's pretty obvious, a lot of the time the characters seem to know what's going on in her head. And I think it's pretty obvious that like she's just a very introverted, shy person, and they are just kind of a very open, welcoming, loving community that kind of like brings her in. I definitely will read the second book. I think the third book is coming out later this year, and I will definitely be reading the second book. I think this was just kind of a cozy hug. It's a warm hug, and I didn't really care about the love story. Laren and Keela are fine. Like it's very kind of, I don't want to say a shallow romance, but like I feel like we could have done with more backstory and insight into Laren. He just felt a little bit one-dimensional. He's a little bit, and this is crazy coming from me as somebody who loves a good golden retriever male main character, he is too golden retriever. He doesn't ever really like seem to do anything wrong ever. Like, I mean, he, at the very beginning when she meets him, like he kind of wanders in and is like trying to do things without asking her and all that, and he apologizes for that immediately, but he's almost like too much of a green flag to the point that I feel like he does get a little bit boring. So I feel like he could have done with a little bit more depth. And I feel like I think the thing I liked about this most was like the world itself and the magic and the way the magic works. I did have to just kind of take a step back and just remind myself that this is very cozy. These characters are all going to be very soft and loving, and that's okay. But yeah, I mean, it was a nice way to end the month, and I think sometimes you just need a warm hug of a book, and that's what this was. So that was everything that I read in March. Let me know what you guys read. Did you read anything that I did? Let me know in the comments. Tell me about what you've been reading and what you're looking forward to in April. As I'm filming this, it's actually Easter Sunday, so happy Easter to those who celebrate. And if not, I just hope you have had a really great Sunday. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.